Hi, I'm Michael Maciel. I am a priest and teacher in the Holy Order of Mans, for those of you who don't know me. I'm the author of World Priest, and we'll be reading from this tonight on the nature of ritual and sacraments. So welcome, everybody, and glad to have you here. As we raise the fire up our spine and it starts to open up our inner faculties, it makes us more of service to people because our sight opens up, our heart opens up, we have greater willpower to do good. We have more generative forces to actually bring life into the world, both literally and figuratively. So I see an exact correlation where those first fruits are brought to the altar and then they're distributed to the people. So it's a complete cycle, right? We raise why do we pursue a spiritual path? Is it for us? Is it just for our own good? If it is, that becomes problematic, and always it becomes problematic in terms of one's ego. You start to look down on other people because you're so holy, or you start to think that you have powers that you don't really have, and you can get delusional because you're never testing them. You're never actually putting them to use in a meaningful and practical way. So you can get really bound up in your head thinking that you've got powers, like Paul Simon said, thinking I had supernatural powers, I slammed into a brick wall. See, there are all kinds of problems that come about as a result of the narcissism that can be developed if you don't give in return. You see, if you don't use your ability, your spirituality in service to people. This is so important. It's like completing the circuit. And the more this is why Jesus said it's more important to give than it is to receive. Because if we're meditating and we're studying and we're developing all of these abilities, if we do it just for ourselves, that's just receiving. That's all we're doing, is we're receiving. And that can get sticky real fast. So don't do that. I know there's a lot here, all right? And maybe some new concepts, such as a solar pattern, such as regarding the sun at the center of the solar system as being the Christ. Specifically, it's like the physical body of the Christ. It is the center of intelligence. It is the organizing principle for this entire body that we live in. And if it seems far-fetched, actually, astrology is one of the best arguments for it, because the 12 signs of the zodiac are like the 12 aspects of the personality of God. And if we're made in God's image and likeness, then what we're really doing is we're a reflection of this solar system. You see, it's our local cosmological home. This is where we live. This is where we are. And by studying the effects of one's natal birth chart, for instance, I'm not an astrologer, but by studying how dramatically those affect the body that we incarnate into, we can see that we're living in a being, and that being is cosmological in nature, and it is our solar system. It's like a cell. It has a nucleus, it has organelles, planets, it has a membrane, or the heliopause. It has all the characteristics that are required for life. And if you were to back away a few tens of light years and look at our solar system from way out there, it would be like an island of life and light within a vast ocean of nothingness, the way it appears. So if you made yourself really big and then came upon the solar system, it would be like a living thing. And if you looked at it with spiritual sight, which means that if you could sense the life in it and the intelligence in it, it would definitely be a living organism. And we live inside that living organism. Now, I have looked at the sun with spiritual sight, and you can do this too. It doesn't mean I'm special. You can do this too. All you have to do is think about it. Think of it in these terms. Look at the sun as though it were a living being. And when you do, you can see it as a living being. And all of a sudden, if you allow your imagination to act as an organ of perception, then you will see in your inner vision, you will see the fantastic array of intelligence and life and beingness that is at the center of this solar system. It's like the one thing I can liken it to is, you see these pictures of archangels blowing through trumpets and just this extraordinary sound that what we experience as like the solar wind. It's like on the spiritual level, it's like these trumpet blasts. It's like this glorious orchestration of victory, of life, of the victory of life over death. It is extraordinary. It is glorious. That's the only word for it. It's just glorious. And the really fabulous thing about this is that the sun and all that energy is not just at the center of the solar system. The sun's energy and intelligence and life and all this glorious sound fills the entire solar system. It fills the whole volume of the solar system. So the sun isn't out there. We're in it. We're in the sun. We're right inside of the sun, because its vibrations fill us. And those vibrations are not just, like scientific vibrations. They're like intelligent. They're patterns of intelligence. And those patterns of intelligence can be seen in every system and every organ and every gland in our bodies. That's what we're made of. That's what constructed us. You think about the eye, the eyeball, it's so complex. It's so extraordinary that it could even evolve. It didn't make itself. The sun created, light created the eye. The eye it's like a call and response, in church, it's like the sun is this continuous call of intelligent patterns, that the intelligence of which is for the express purpose of drawing life into being. This is actually the meaning of the word agape. It's participatory life, participatory love. It calls forth creation with its word. Its word is that sound, that blast of intelligent pattern that is creative. It calls forth, it calls life right out of matter. It causes matter to organize itself in patterns that will support and sustain life. It's unbelievably, fantastically intricate and amazing. Again, the only word for it is glorious. It's just this loving relationship that we live right in the midst of and that we participate in. Because the more we open up to that intelligent word, that means vibration, right? It's when speaking a word is it is a pattern of intelligence, just translated into physical, manifestation. It's intelligence in form. That's what a word is. So if you could imagine all words, and not just all words like as in what we speak now and all the different languages, but all words that have ever been and are now and ever will be, and all the possibilities, all the possibilities inherent within that, that's what we call the Word of God. And that word is the expression of the spiritual being that manifests physically as the sun. Reality presents itself in octaves. That's what, some people call different dimensions. You take the life force in your body, and if you feel the movement of life in you, and then you just imagine, what's the higher octave of that? You see, what's the higher octave of you? And as you do that, you begin to detect what one of the old prophets described as Jacob's ladder. You see, you have angels ascending and descending through these octaves. That's resonance. That's vibrational resonance. But, we're not talking about vibrations like we were talking earlier about vibrating water. I mean, these vibrations are so, the complexity of them is beyond comprehension. The complexity of our own bodies, we don't even know, we know a little bit about our bodies. Science is getting better all the time, but we haven't even begun to approach the fullness of the complexity of these things. Hell, we don't even know where our words come from, right? When we speak, where does that come from? How is it that I can speak words that have meaning and you can hear them as words that have meaning? We have no idea how that happens. That is so beyond our conscious ability. I mean, you get dizzy just thinking about it, right? So, and so don't be thinking that consciousness is everything, right? Because there's so much that we're not conscious of. That's who we are. I mean, our being comes out of this vast unconsciousness we have no idea of, but it's us. That's us. That's the real part of us. Our consciousness is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just what we need to know in any given moment, right? All the rest of it is filtered out. Okay, so I'm just on a rant here. Your turn.
Michael, I just can't even tell you how much I appreciate you and this whole thing, because you speak everything that I feel and see and understand, and I can't freaking talk about it to anybody. And oh, it's just a breath of fresh air.
Oh,
It
thank you.
really,
Thank you.
and it's just I can't even tell you how much I appreciate that gift.
Yeah, well, this is what happens when you pull the cork, right?
It's bad. It's intense. Yeah.
And I say that as an invitation to you,
Woo.
to all of you, pull the cork, start expressing, start articulating. And
Yeah, yeah. That's what happens when I speak. People are like, "What the?" They're just sitting there like, because we speak a different language. But then I think it's like, I think that something does happen in people where they're like, that some of it did make sense, right?
yeah,
And then end up kind of wanting to know more. Um, but yeah, it's a
yeah,
really interesting thing when you describe the way you see things or feel things, and then other people are like, "What the?" They
right.
almost are. They get a little curious about it.
Well, you guys are you're the ideal audience, right? Because you've all studied this stuff for a long time and you have your own experiences and you're not unfamiliar with this. If I were to speak in front of a cold audience, you might say, or people who don't, it would be, the whole thing would be very different, right?
Hmm.
But it's because you have an opening for this information that I can pull the cork and just start talking and express what I am experiencing within myself, and you'll get it, right? Because we're on the same wavelength here. We're on the same page. So the challenge for you, if you want to spread the word, if you want to do that, then you just have to find your audience, right? Tune into the person you're talking to and find that resonance. It's easy with you guys because we easily resonate. So, but yeah, just they say that you teach what you need to learn.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah.
You teach what you need to learn. And I can't tell you how much I learned by teaching these classes. I mean, it just opens and opens and opens. And so I encourage you, all of you, to teach, talk about this stuff. And if you don't have an audience, write it. Writing is a fabulous tool because writing is just another form of thinking. Writing is another form of thinking, and so speaking, right? As we speak, we organize our thoughts. As we writing is speech slowed way down, and you can really organize your thoughts through writing. I mean, it's a marvelous tool for self-exploration. So keep a journal. Journal is a great way. I've got a stack of notebooks this thick that go back a long time. Just write, write and speak these things. And as you do, then they start to take shape within you. You kind of, we speak ourselves into being. So, which is interesting because, we think in terms of the word, as in St. John, in the beginning was the word, and thinking of it as this vibratory pattern that's continually being expressed through the spiritual body of the Son. That's what God is doing. God is in the midst of this speaking itself into being. Creation never stops. It wasn't a one and done. Creation is ongoing. And as it explore, how does it explore itself? How does this universal creative intelligence explore itself? It does so through us. I mean, we're kind of the cutting edge of that. It does it through all forms of life, but we're the cutting edge. We're the ones who have the capacity for self-reflection. We have the possibility, we have all the possibility. So this word, the logos, the word of St. John, in the beginning was the word. It is continually being respoken. It's not even respoken. It's like it speaks itself without pause, continually being spoken. And as we participate in that, you see, again, that word again, participation, it calls to us, we respond. We feel the life energy in ourselves, and then we do something with it, you know. And if we can do something with it, not just physically, but mentally, you know, by praying for something to manifest, you see, to bring into to realize something that is as yet only exists in potential. You see, that's what prayer is. We're just as God is calling forth life out of matter. When we pray, we're calling a possibility out of an unformed potential. You see, if we can imagine it, but it's not yet manifested, that's a potential, and it's a real thing. So by prayer, that's what we do. We speak the word. We say, come on, you know, come into being. I accept you and let it happen. You see, it's what every artist does. That's what a dancer does. That's what athletes do. It's what everybody does, writers and singers and anybody who's involved in anything creative. They're calling something out of nothing, right? This is the theological principle of creation out of nothing. What is it? Ex nihilo or something, right? It's so mind-bogglingly real. You can't even call it philosophy. That we continually call into manifestation something out of nothing because it's potential, you see. And that's the way we participate in the creation. God's calling us out of nothingness, and then we in turn call something out of nothing. We're continually creating. You know, we buy an empty lot, we hire an architect, we sit down with the architect and we figure it out. You see, that empty lot is empty. There's nothing there. But as we design it and then bring the resources together and employ the right people and start the construction, pretty soon, where there was nothing, now there is something. And that's how everything works. That's how it works. You are like a broadcasting station. We all are. And it's that, you know, just like the sun has this clarion blast of intelligent vibratory patterns, that we do the same thing. We are continually shining like the sun, but what we shine is intelligence imbued with feeling, imbued with memories, imbued with our ideas, our, you know, the way we participate in the world, the way we are in the world. All of that is translated into a vibration, and that vibration has a character to it. That's what we call soul. That's is the soul. That's the nature, the character of our vibration is our soul, because it's composed of everything that we are and have done, and even all the potential that we can do. So that, don't, you know, forget all of the theological stuff about sin, or, you know, what the dictionary says about it. It's really, does your vibration help or does it hurt? Is it constructive or is it destructive? Is it resonant or dissonant? And And all of those words I just used are all context driven. In other words, sometimes your vibration will be helpful, and other times it'll be neutral, and other times it'll be, destructive, just depending on where you're at. If you're giving a presentation in a corporate boardroom, that's an entirely different vibration than if you're teaching your kids at home who can barely walk, how to love and how to be, part of the family. You see, that's two different vibrations altogether. So you wouldn't take that and bring it into the boardroom. Neither would you approach your children the way you would approach a board of directors. It would be sinful to treat your kids the way you treat your employees. And it would be sinful to treat your employees the way you treat your kids. You see, so we can't reduce it to a set of rules. I mean, there's one rule you could say, love God with everything, which is loving the overall vibration of the spiritual being that we live within. That's loving that, and then loving each other the same way, which if there's any modifier you could add to the word love, it would be appropriate, right? Always make your love appropriate to the person in the situation.
In those two examples that you put out, like the common element is that you're casting a vision in each one, but the vision of what you're casting needs to be resilient with the elements that are present, because creation involves the rearranging of what is already there. So in the situation with the children, the elements are very different than in the boardroom. But there's a common element, a vision that's being cast, which involves a unity between thought and word.
Yeah. It's all about consilience. It's striking a balance of idea and receptiveness, right? You pitch something to a group of business people, and they've got to find it relevant, and they have to find it advantageous to their own interests, right? So and if that's a stretch, if you have to really reel them in, so to speak, then you've got to build bridges, and in the process you're going to probably destroy some of their preconceptions, and that's the adult world, right?
No.
So that's how we learn how to do that. Like, tonight in this class, I'm bringing enough energy to it that it probably is breaking down some preconceptions that you have. That by its very nature is violent, right? That's destructive, because in order for some of these concepts to be conveyed, they kind of have to come in with a considerable amount of force, kind of like you can't drive a nail by tapping it, right? You have to hit it. You have to drive it in. So but I can do that with you because you're receptive to that. I have your permission, right? So, but just be aware, and be aware too that as you come into greater states of awareness of these things that I'm talking about, you're going to have to do the same. You're going to have to approach it with the same degree of violence, because it really does have kind of a nature of violence, to break through your own preconceptions. You see, you have to be your own blacksmith and beat the hell out of your molten, heat up the iron and then pound it into something useful. You see, because don't never underestimate the inertia of your own thinking.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why we do these kinds of things, right? And this is why we get into conversations that are meaningful and vigorous, right? They have to be, we can't you can't hide, you can't hide your light. You have to speak, and speak into, and what you're speaking into is not always going to be receptive. And it's like with affirmations, right? I am a perfect spiritual being with in perfect health, and all of that. You're speaking into an enormous amount of inertia whenever you do that. Those affirmations it's like beating your head against a brick wall, and that brick wall is all of the subconscious stuff you've got going on, right? This is why affirmations don't usually work, because you're not preparing what's behind you, right? You've got to prepare that. You got to prepare that field. That's what the whole parable of the sower is all about. You have to prepare your own subconscious for something new before it can grow and transform you. And that's the spiritual path, guys. That's what the spiritual path is. It's tilling that ground and planting seeds, letting those seeds come forth, and then harvesting them and eating them and letting them change you. See, it's a multi-step process. Yeah, affirmations is like, trying to yell at a freight train as it's coming at you. It's not going to, the freight train's going to win. So you got to get inside the freight train, right? You got to get inside what all that stuff that's going on behind the scenes that you act out. You got to kind of get smart about that. When you have a negative reaction, that's a golden opportunity for you to find out what the hell is going on inside of me that I'm reacting in this way. You see?
Michael, how does resistance create energy?
It creates energy in the form of heat, right? Friction creates heat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to utilize that energy, then you have to utilize the heat that it generates. But if you really want to utilize it, instead of just, letting it produce friction like that, hook it up to a generator. A lot of you are here for the radical meditation classes. You got all this energy in the pelvic area, and it's always turning, and it's always, churning like that. Hook that up to a generator. You do all this in mind, of course. And this is, again, your imagination is your organ of perception, and it's your means to create. So you see that energy turning like a wheel, and it's got an axle, right? And you hook that axle into generators. And as that energy, and like, you see something you want, you really want it, and that's energy in motion. You're going to go get it, right? But if you take that energy and you recycle it internally by taking the momentum of it and harnessing it, and then turning it into, just like Jesus told the young rich man, sell all that you have and then give the money, the energy, to the poor. So what you're doing when you harness your desire energy, your anything like that just kind of takes you over, if you can harness that and you feed that energy back into your spine, see, into the energy of the Kundalini that you have, then it's going to light you up. It's going to light you up. You see? That's called sublimation.
Mm,
It's a
thank
real
you.
thing. It's a real thing. If you learn how to do it, radical meditation is, we're going to go into that even in greater detail, because this is like this will save you. This is salvation, right? Otherwise, all that energy you've got going, and especially in the lower chakras, you let that energy out, without a leash, and it's going to destroy you.
I'm starting this thing where I feel like I'm supposed to do like bodybuilding. It's weird, but it's what I'm supposed to do. And I am noticing I've been doing it 2 months, but I'm like starting to feel just so, I can't do all the things everybody does, right? Like I can't go eat, I can't go out and socialize, I can't go, and it requires a tremendous amount of discipline. And I'm doing this actually for what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is the reason I'm doing it, spiritual practice. And it's not about the bodybuilding or the having a good body necessarily. It's about this exact thing. But I don't like when I get that feeling of just like, I gotta eat something. And we talk about putting it back in the spine, but I still don't understand that part. I just don't get that for some reason.
Taking the energy and
Putting it into the spine. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, it's not an easy concept to get across. That's why I use the idea of the Tesla, the automobile.
Yeah.
They utilize the inertia of slowing down, instead of making the brakes do all of that work of slowing the car down. They put that inertia into, they use that slowing down energy to turn generators, which then feed the energy right back into the batteries.
Okay.
So if you get that idea, and then with your imagination, you set up this wheel, that like a water wheel, that your life force is turning. That's the flow of water that's always going through you. Then you harness that and you wire it back in. So
Okay. I'm gonna sit with this because this is for
we'll
some
we'll
reason
work on it.
it's not
It's not easy. It's not easy.
okay.
Suzanne?
Myself. I so appreciate you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So I appreciate your question because I had the same quandary and then I just sort of let it go. So you brought it up again. So I was answering your question in myself and I came up with this. I'm curious what you think, Mike, is that, so like I'm on this discipline with my food and I get this urge to eat or drink something that's really not good for me. I'm thinking that if I can see that urge as a color with my inner sight, and I can see it inside my body, I just use my imagination, like, okay, so it's here or it's here, wherever it is. And then I also use my imagination to start turning the wheel, and then I watch it with my inner vision. I don't know, I'm going to try that to see if that's the way to get a handle on it. Because I think I've been trying to just feel it. And I think it might be easier to see it, imagination to see it. And then the feelings will come after that. And then that strength and power. So.
That's great. Thank you. The reason I set it up as this visualization, this idea of a water wheel, is that it's just a way to get started, right? It's giving you something to visualize, and that's, Suzanne, that's why you coming up with this variation of it is really great, because come up with a variation. If the way I'm presenting it doesn't work for you, come up with your own. Just the principle is there. It's like this flow of energy is it's like in the chapter tonight, it's like the energy is going to take the first available outlet. So what you're doing is if you can kind of get a visualization of that, then deny that outlet, shut that valve, so that the energy is forced to go up, you see, to the next one. And and the next and the next. So it's the same thing. If you sense, especially like the sexual energies, which are very, very powerful, and because we're human beings, right? That's a very powerful draw all the time. So you can take that, and it has to stay what it is. You can't dress it up and pretend it's something else. It has to be what it is. And then you take that energy and you put it into something else, into a constructive action of some kind. Right? Say you feel this urge to raid the refrigerator, then here's the secret to it. I swear to God, this really works. Is that if you have the urge to raid the refrigerator, which is an easy topic, right? Because everybody can relate to it. You have that urge. You don't make yourself bad for it. Don't say, I shouldn't feel that. No, you are feeling that, right? Nothing changes until it becomes what it is. So you take that same urge and you turn around and you go to the sink and you do some dishes. Is that going to feel good? Hell no, not going to feel good. It's going to piss you off. But as you take that energy and you put it into something else, you will watch it transform in front of your eyes. It will, but if you get in the way of it, you see, and getting in the way of it means, oh hell, I have to do this, or I'm really a weak-willed person because I can't even resist, eating junk, that kind of thing. All of that subverts this process. It will derail it. So you have to bring the rawness of it. You just bring the rawness of that and you use that energy as fuel to do something else. Just like Starlight, you were talking about weightlifting, right? Bodybuilding. Oh man, that's a great way to do it. You watch guys at the gym and you see them bring all of their mother issues and all of their issues with their employers and all of the injustice of society and all of that. And it's like,
But the thing is, like, this has surprised me. This whole thing has just shocked me because I used to judge all these people for being this way. And then I speak to them and the humility and because when you do this kind of shit, it is like so humbling. And you get to see the part that animal inside you that is like ravenous and it just wants to it comes out.
Yep. It's key 8. It's key 8.
There it is again.
There she is.
Yeah.
That lion is not a pussycat.
I got it like on my phone because I'm really, really like, I'm doing this, man. I'm doing it.
Yeah. That lion is red for a reason.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah. So this is what they call the razor's edge in spiritual work. They taught us about this in the order. It's a razor's edge. It's the straight gate that Jesus talked about. It's like, don't waver, because especially as you start to do this, the energy will ramp up. It's like you're a jet airplane that keeps going faster and faster. You know how some of those jet airplanes have tiny little wings? Because they're going so damn fast. It's just the slightest deflection is going to turn them with enormous force. So as you advance spiritually, and by that I mean you untap this energy, you pull the cork and you got all this energy going, don't screw it up. Don't try to pull a hard right turn, because it's going to rip your wings right off. You see?
Yeah.
This is why in spiritual training there's so much emphasis put on following the rules, discipline, getting your moral compass tuned up and lined up. Because if you, and believe me, I have seen so many quote unquote greatly spiritually evolved people flame out and crash really badly. You don't want to do that. Just respect the energy. You see, respect it. Don't get all, focused and build your spiritual momentum and then try to live the way you used to live. Try to do the things you used to do, because it'll put you into a tailspin real fast.
Oh, well, that's also why humble service is important, because
Absolutely.
it keeps everything in perspective.
Yes. Yeah. If it doesn't matter, go along with it, right? If somebody asks you to do something and it's not it's not unethical, it's not, it may be inconvenient. The more inconvenient it is, the better. Just do it. Just be compliant, be humble, be meek in that way. Just say, sure, I'll do that. Just do it. And that keeps your ego down, right?
Yeah.
So it's real important. And I'm sure we all have stories we can tell where we, came too close to the ground, going too fast and burned out. So be real careful with this stuff as you open these things up in yourselves. Just be respectful of it and know that it's real. That's the main thing. Just know that all these things that I'm telling you are real. They have real life consequences. So just think, use your head, think, is what I'm doing in accordance with the good of all? In the priesthood or ordination, we have to take a vow to serve everyone. I vow myself to the service of all, not just Democrats, not just Republicans, not just blacks, not just whites, not just, whatever hell you can think up, it's all crazy. It's everyone. The more you identify with and align yourself with the spiritual being of the Christ, the Son of God, the more you have to be in service to everyone, because that's what it does.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it says in the Old Testament, he makes his sun to shine on the just and the unjust alike, or the rain to fall, whatever. Life-giving rain, life-giving sunlight to everyone. You cannot take sides. You cannot be on this team or that team. You just can't. Not in live a spiritual life, because the more you live spiritually, the more spiritual energy will start to manifest in you, and then look the hell out, because your little tiny mistakes will become big mistakes.
Yeah.
So you got that to look forward to.
Well, that's the nature of power, as above, so below, and warning taken.
Yep, absolutely. Anybody have any other questions or anything you'd like to say?
Thank you, Michael.
You bet. It's my pleasure. This is great. We don't get to have conversations like this very often in our lives.
This is my favorite class so far.
Oh, great. Yeah. When you're bench pressing, Starlet, just everything in you. Bring it all. Bring it on.
I'll be thinking of you, Michael.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful night.
You too.
And when he was talking to us about the sacrifice in the temple, he said that, of course, there was only a certain part of the animal was once it was slaughtered, only a certain part was burnt. But what they did is at a particular point when it was burning, they poured wine over it. And the smell, that fragrant smell, it wasn't the animal burning, it was the animal doused in the wine. And it did produce a very beautiful smell.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he also said that what happened to the rest of it, the priests were allowed to take part of the animal for their own use, but this was a world of no refrigeration.
Right.
And so the rest of the prepared meat was served to the people at the temple. And it was where most people, that's the only time they got meat. They pretty much were vegetarians, no choice. So that's the temple, and that was common also in Greece and other parts of the Middle East. The meat was shared with the people at the temple, the non-priestly class.
Well, isn't that interesting, Lida? That sounds very much like communion to me. This is about burnt offerings. Fire transforms. The outer symbol of offering an animal as a burnt sacrifice is repugnant to us today. That's why we don't do it anymore. But just because we've abandoned the practice doesn't mean that we should forget the principle. We take the very best we have, the first fruits, and offer them to God. Not what we can spare, not the leftovers, not when we can or when we feel like it, but right here, right now. We offer up our highest, most exalted states of mind, our most joyful, fulfilled feelings, and our greatest victories. In short, we offer it all. The word sacrifice has fallen out of favor because it's associated with shame and the sense that there's something wrong with living a full life. Life should be enjoyed. Why would anyone want to give up a good thing? Can we buy our way into heaven? Is that the idea? Livestock was wealth in ancient times. Giving up the best of your herd was painful. Today, money is wealth. In some churches, after the collection is taken up, the basket is placed on the altar. That's a recapitulation of the burnt offering. But all of this is meaningless unless the outer symbol corresponds to an inner act. Where is the altar within us? Where is the fire? And what do we bring to it to be consumed? Everyone knows the saying, no pain, no gain. The reason most of us don't exercise as much as we should is because it hurts. Stretching is hard, running is torture, walking is boring. This isn't true for everyone, of course, but you get my point. Advancement takes effort. Why then do we believe that spiritual development should come with no effort at all, as though it just happens? So what do we burn, and where do we burn it? Let's take an oil refinery as an example. In order to get gasoline and other refined volatile chemicals, we heat crude oil in a tall distillation tower. As the gases heat up, they rise higher and higher in the tower. At various points, there are bleed-off valves. The denser, cruder substances take the first available exit, while the more volatile substances keep rising. Generally speaking, the end products vary in their monetary value in direct proportion to how refined they are. Human beings are also refineries. The fire is our life force. which rises up our spine. All along our spine are outlets of opportunity, the lower of which have rather large openings, so to speak, while the upper ones are harder to reach. The lower openings feel good. The energy rushes out with wild abandon, quite a party, really. But because the energy bleeds out early, all of the upward momentum is lost, and very little of real value makes it to the top. Carolyn Mace, in her book Anatomy of the Spirit, gives a marvelous description of these bleed-off valves along the spine. At lower levels, our life force expresses itself in the most tenacious, survival-oriented ways, having mostly to do with tribal attachments, procreation, and aggression. At the upper levels, it expresses more as compassion, creativity, insight, and oneness. The more we value our attachments to everyday life and its concerns, the less the upper aspects get developed. So if we value those aspects, we sacrifice the lower ones, at least for a time, so that the life force within us can reach the top. When Jesus told the young rich man to sell all that he had and give to the poor, he was telling him to convert his attachments and proclivities into spiritual cash. Whether our bound-up energy is dedicated to material goods, emotional ties, sexual or culinary appetites, or whatever, the energy is just energy. It isn't good energy or bad energy. It can be cashed in and converted into usable energy. And as we all know, it's much easier to redirect energy than it is to stop it. Trying to stop energy is like trying to stop a locomotive. The locomotive always wins. The poor that are in need of our cash are those aspects of ourselves that have been starved of the energy they need in order to develop. Our distractions with our career keep us so busy that we forget to meditate. Anytime an emotional trigger goes off, we rush to the nearest exit or addiction so that we don't have to face what's really going on. Our anger only serves to reinforce our need to be right, instead of galvanizing us into taking meaningful action. There are many impoverished aspects of ourselves we could address if we weren't so fixated on how good or how special our lower nature makes us feel. Our lower nature is our animal nature. This is the animal that has to be sacrificed in order that our higher nature can receive the energy the lower nature has been hogging. It's really a matter of redirecting the energy within us. This is the real meaning of burnt offering and sacrifice. As priests, we have to know how to do that, not only for ourselves, but for others too. As a teenager, I loved to drive fast. I had a British sports car, and I competed in mini and autocross on weekends, and often raced my friends around Lake Tahoe and up and down the Virginia City Highway, just outside of Reno, Nevada. It's a wonder that I'm still alive. Later, as I got older, I would find myself from time to time driving like a teenager. My work required a lot of driving, and the temptation to make it interesting was sometimes too much to resist. But inevitably, I would start to feel the long arm of the law catching up with me. I just knew that if I didn't slow down and drive the speed limit, I was sure to get a ticket. It was like a pressure building up inside of me. I discovered, however, that if I obeyed the speed limit signs, or better yet, drove under the speed limit, the accumulated karma would start to burn off. It felt like a spiritual fever. It was my own brand of penance, driving slower than what the speed limit allowed. I was sacrificing my need for speed so that I wouldn't have to pay for my past transgressions. I still had to pay, but it was a controlled burn, not the flash fire of a speeding ticket. There's nothing wrong with the pleasure of life pleasures of life or going with the flow. Earth is a beautiful place, and the bodies we inhabit can provide us with many a joyful experience. But if we want more than just a pleasant life, if we're called to higher elevations, sacrifices must be made. It takes effort to climb up out of a rut. The potential for easy pleasures can be saved up for more substantial gains. The pull of Earth's gravity can be overcome if you have enough fuel to achieve escape velocity. The pleasurable feeling in your gut can be channeled up into your head if you have the will, and the fireworks can be spectacular. If the altar of sacrifice hadn't been acted out in all of its physical goriness, the principle would have been lost. Some things have to be graphically demonstrated in order to make the idea stick. Today, we don't have to do that. But we do have to find that same altar within ourselves. Simply slaughtering an animal had to have been a lot easier than giving up our favorite distractions. But inner distractions have always been harder than the outer ones, n'est-ce pas? This is about sin, absolution, and healing. Let's talk some more about priests being catalysts. A catalyst is a chemical that breaks apart a chemical compound by taking one of its components for itself. But because the new pairing with the catalyst is unstable, it quickly breaks apart. A good example of this is the way that chlorine interacts with ozone. Bear with me here. Understanding catalytic action is essential in understanding absolution. Ozone is a molecule of 3 oxygen atoms, O3. In nature, ozone protects the Earth from harmful ultraviolet rays, sunlight, by acting as a shield in the upper atmosphere. When man-made chemicals such as chlorofluorocarbons from air conditioners and aerosol cans are released into the air, the chlorine in them takes one of the oxygen atoms in an ozone molecule and binds with it, leaving behind a normal oxygen molecule, O2. But because the new bond between the chlorine and oxygen atom is volatile, it quickly breaks apart, leaving the chlorine atom free to interact with yet another ozone molecule. This enables one atom of chlorine to destroy 1 million molecules of ozone every minute. And you see the exponential, advancement of that, how it grows very rapidly. Here's the spiritual correlation. When we think negative thoughts, it changes the quality of our presence, the way we are being in the world. We begin to vibrate at a different frequency. Everyone can tell that there's something going on with us, that we're not ourselves. At the spiritual level, these negative thoughts have substance, just as matter has substance on the physical level. And like physical matter, this spiritual stuff acts and reacts according to the same principles as its physical counterpart. Too much negativity in a person's thinking can cause all sorts of complications, from health issues to psychological problems, just as chlorine causes problems in the upper atmosphere. Vitality suffers. As with any accumulation of negativity, the worse it gets, the worse it gets. The effects are cumulative. If it goes unchecked, negativity can disrupt our entire system, both physically and spiritually. Priests have the ability to absorb this negativity and then release it, just like a catalyst. We do this through direct contact with a person, either by the laying on of hands or through a psychic connection. It doesn't matter if we're in the physical presence of the afflicted person. Mental contact is just as real. This is how Jesus was able to heal people, such as the centurion's servant, from a distance. Human negativity is largely emotion-driven and is therefore highly volatile. It will readily discharge itself when the conditions are right. Onto any willing recipient. Well-meaning people are affected by negativity by unknowingly attuning themselves with the negative vibrations of another person. It rubs off on them. They take on the other person's sins, and it changes the quality of their own spiritual presence. It's important, therefore, that if you attempt to absolve someone of his or her sins, that you first learn how to do it safely. This is not as difficult as it might sound. We simply know that we are not the ones doing it, that it's God doing the work. We are merely the conduit, the catalyst by which it happens. Sin, for the purposes of this discussion, is defined as a vibratory condition that interferes with a person's physical and spiritual vitality. Other definitions, such as missing the mark, do little to help us understand the actual dynamics of this phenomenon. So it's better if we approach the subject scientifically and look at it in terms of power, force, and energy. As a vibratory condition, vitality is a state of resonance with the one life, whereas sin is a state of dissonance. The one life is the fundamental frequency emanating from the spiritual body of the Sun, S-U-N, the Christ being that pervades this entire solar system. All life depends upon it for support. As long as there are intrinsic alignments, vibrationally speaking, between a life form and its energy source, the sun, it will thrive. But introduce a dissonant vibration and reverberations start to occur, which can then create health problems. We are spiritual beings, which means that we are energy first and matter second. Matter is the stuff that hangs on an energy matrix, the way that sand arranges itself in patterns on a paper diaphragm when you vibrate it with an electronic tone. It's called cymatics. It's the vibratory matrix that creates the pattern, not the sand. Change the matrix and you change the visible pattern. In hierarchical terms, the vibration is superior to the pattern. It rules it. The primary source of vibration in this solar system is the sun. Its vibrations create a standing field in the space that surrounds it, extending to the farthest reaches of its boundaries, the heliopause. What is a standing field? If you drop a pebble into a body of water, the displacement will create ripples. The ripples will radiate outward in concentric rings as they spend the energy of the pebble's impact with the surface of the water. But if you vibrate a liquid in a container, say a bowl of water sitting on top of a stereo speaker, the sound vibrations will cause the surface of the water to ripple in stationary patterns. The concentric rings will stay in their positions and not travel to the rim of the bowl. Vary the frequency of the sound, and the rings will arrange themselves accordingly, immediately and precisely. Our physical and spiritual bodies are constituted in the same way. They are held in place by the frequencies emanating from the center of our being. The patterns are infinitely more complex, of course, much more so than the ripples in a bowl of water. But in principle, they are the same thing. Any disturbances in the vibratory matrix are going to affect our entire physical and spiritual system. When we allow intense negative thinking into our vibrational makeup, we alter the patterns of the flow of life's energy through us. This is called interference. When such a condition is allowed to persist, long-term damage will result. We are not the creators of our vibratory makeup. We can affect it with our thinking, but we are not the architects of its fundamental structure. God is. In Christian mystical language, the fundamental architecture of human being is called the Son, S-O-N-S-U-N, of man. The sun is the first manifestation of the intelligence of our local cosmos. Its energy holds our spiritual vehicles in their designated patterns by feeding and resonating with the solar pattern within our own being. Christian mystics throughout history have been keenly aware of this spiritual form. St. Paul called it the celestial body. These greater patterns do not necessarily look the same at different scales, but in principle, they are identical. The principles never change, but the outward forms continually evolve. Evolution is the key word here, because unless we understand human being as a dynamic constellation of vibratory patterns, we cannot heal the problems that beset it. Healing is the process of reinforcing the solar pattern of the sun, S-O-N-S-U-N, the Son of Man, so that it can purge itself of the patterns of interference created by our negative thinking. Priests do not have to be perfect in and of themselves in order to heal others or absolve people of their sins. No more than a midwife has to deliver the baby through her own body. Priests do not have to fully embody the solar pattern, but they do have to be able to access it. And they have to be able to connect it to the person they are healing. They have the authority to mediate the necessary energies which realign and strengthen the solar pattern within an individual. The revitalized spiritual celestial body can then purge itself of the harmful effects of negative thinking. So we strengthen that solar pattern by bringing energy into it, amping it up so that it then can realign itself with the solar pattern. Sin is an archaic word. We really should get rid of it. It keeps us from understanding that it's a condition and not a fundamental flaw in the design of human being. Creation is God's self-exploration, the engine of which is possibility. In order for possibility to exist, there must also be the possibility for making mistakes. You can't have one without the other. That's the trade-off. Free will has its purpose in this divine scheme. It's the one thing that makes growth and development possible. Because unless our choices arise from within us, unbidden and unscripted by others, they do not benefit us spiritually. We do not get to heaven by merely following the rules. We get there when we take heaven into our hearts. Righteousness comes when we desire to be righteous, not when we act righteously because we're afraid of what will happen if we don't. Right action must be spontaneous before it can be right action.